Well, good day, folks, and welcome back to the Secret Solve. This is a program where we try to find out what Byron Price and the rest of the authors and artists were thinking about back in 1980, one or two, when they're putting together the book The Secret. Today's presentation is a continuation of an earlier show, specifically looking at the back of the book and what you might have missed in the back of the book. So everybody knows the Chicago solve was the image number five, and they presented it using not verse number five, but in any way, we all know that was the solve. So let's look at what the back of the book can tell you. Well, first of all, starting on page 55, we have a field guide to the fair people. Okay, well, the Field Museum is basically the first clue to the Chicago puzzle. It's right there in the field guide to the fair people. Okay, so anyway, if you don't like that one, then let's just move on. Now, the major demon could have something to do with this solve because there is this large eared figure with a mustache and a big nose and some bushy eyebrows. Um, I don't know of any specific places that this would directly relate to, but the guy is sitting on a rail. And so, if you, a railing, if you will. So, I don't know if you can draw any inferences from that or not. But so, anyway, I'm not sure that one provides much additional detail for our puzzle. However, if you do look in the background, you have the by the chimney, you have that design that was in the puzzle for Milwaukee, or what people think is in Milwaukee. So and it maybe has something to do with that. Well, I'm just going to skip through to the ones that I'm pretty sure are related to Chicago. And the first one is the Freudian sylphs, I guess. See, I did my own Freudian sylph right there. Anyway, or slip, whatever it is. So I'm pretty sure that the image figure on page 69 depicts a Mayor Daley. It definitely depicts the same fairy queen that was pouring the water, at least a similar fairy queen. And I believe that's probably Martin Luther King in that one. And this had to do with the Daily. He was the mayor of Chicago. Daily said one time, "The police are not here to create disorder; they're here to preserve disorder." So that's one of the gaffes that would have pointed you to Chicago. The other thing about Martin Luther King might be obvious to a good number of people. There's also an inference here to the um, oh, the was it the convention, the Democratic or Republican convention, in which there was a lot of Freudian sylphs, if you will. So that I think is the first section of the back of the book that lends a good confirmation to some puzzle work in the back that can be used to solve the puzzle. The next one I'm fairly certain has some inferences is page 83, the handy manticore. The illustration in this one, Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall in the text portion of this. And so you've got the stone sitting on the actual wall. Um, but you have this 222 window spackling compound. And if you compare this whole idea of 222 Jackson Street or Jackson Drive and the fact that that's a window glazing compound, and that what you're supposed to look at is a blue arc of lights that comes and emanates through a bunch of windows, if you will, atop the Metropolitan Building, you have a good confirmation that 222 is glazing compound used for windows to be used in your solve. Similarly, I think that if you use the Weller solder gun as confirmation, and you also used the spanner wrench and the Maxwell House can, you would get some additional confirmations for some of the puzzles. But I'm pretty sure that this one is has a little inference to the puzzle. The next one, I'm pretty sure, has some sort of inference, and probably to more than one puzzle, is the story on the page 94, 95 about the mind boggles and watching the flames make pictures is in here. The vice president of programming of a major television network is another statement. And so I think the mentions of wind uh, would also be important as well. The image itself, uh, I don't know if it would work specifically, but I think that the verse is mainly where you get your clues out of that one. The sophomore jinx is definitely John Belushi eating the goldfish. That's definitely a caricature of Belushi. And so here you have two fairly good confirmations of something happened with the sophomore jinx. As I mentioned earlier, the other page with the sophomore jinx has the death mask in the background, and it also has a refrigerator. It has the bocce ball courts and the shoes. It has the U, and we all know the guy that was jinxed was Papulo. And the next one that is fairly obviously got an inference to part of the puzzle is the Kinderguardians. The Kinderguardians, and I don't know if uh, Frank Kukla Fran and Ollie originated out of Chicago, but I know at the time there was the other inference is the network. So in 1980, you had ABC, NBC, and CBS. But then you had Superstation TBS out of um, Atlanta, who started broadcasting Braves baseball. And then you had Chicago, had another uh, network broadcast that was uh, starting to try to compete with the networks. And so there was these quote unquote superstations where their local market become a national, and they would broadcast programming outside of ABC, NBC, and CBS. So I think that was the thing that you might have also supposed to have gotten out of this. But if you're here in the image on page uh, 119, you have a picture of water being poured on a fire in the Perard drawing. And it appears to be some sort of prehistoric dinosaur, and it's got a scarf on, so it means it has to do with a winter puzzle, if you will. And the boy with the little match in the Perard drawing is positioned in front of the large ogre figure. The car is running into the back of the figure. Um, And so I think there might have been something there, but the spotter's guide says that we know that the kindergartens have been doing their work when we see a baby waddle unscathed from a train wreck, or a 6-year-old climbing uh, unchewed from the gator pond, or an infant giggling between the rungs of a fallen ladder. Okay, well, the infant giggling between the rungs of a fallen ladder is an inference to the Lindbergh baby. And the unscathed from a train wreck has to do with the Chicago train wreck. And the child climbing from the gator pond has to do, well, sadly, it has to do with Michael Rockefeller. Um, so, they're telling you who to look for. Adrano, by the way, which was mentioned in this article, is a reference to Cleveland because Harry Drackett invented that one along with the other things. So the Perard drawing, um, I don't understand the legs on this animal because it looks like they have 2 feet and there's like a part of a body. The parts of that animal in the background aren't quite the way you think they are, and then there seems to be maybe like a tunnel of love where there shouldn't be a tunnel of love, and that's a pretty the show Kukla, Fran, and Ollie originated on Chicago television, uh, as well as Romper Room. And so I think the Kindergartens also play into this TV. Uh, the kids are just watching the TV, and that's the Guardians. Okay, so who can resist the back of the book story about the Chicago World's Ferry? And people deny, there are deniers that there's one in St. Louis. And we have the spirit of St. Louis in here. I don't know what the hell's wrong with you people who don't believe that there's one in St. Louis. Proof of concept. The back of the book introduces you to the Chicago World's Ferry, and lo and behold, there is one in Chicago. So I'm going to read the whole entire story here to you because you deny that the back of the book has anything to do with where the puzzles were. So the Urbs Segunda. Now, there is an urban predator living in Chicago at the time of the 70s, if you will. He's a giant hulking of a man who likes to find little boys at bus stations downtown. With that information, the Chicago World's Ferry, a hulking, towering, powerful, muscled giant, a hog butcher, toolmaker, and stacker of wheat with a titanic inferiority complex. Uh, who are we describing? As everybody knows by now, at the northwest gates. Okay, you do know where John Wayne Gacy. Okay, I'm not gonna explain it to you. Boundless, barren, windswept plains surrounded him from 3 sides. So he snuggles up against Lake Michigan for warmth. Poor thing. Okay, what city has boundless, barren, windswept plains? What image has windmills, wind chimes, and wind other devices in it? Oh, it's only one puzzle. For some reason, the Chicago World's Ferry toddles. Maybe it's the gallons of Prohibition gin still secreted within. Well, what kind of refrigeration technique could you use to secret Prohibition era gin? It'd have to be a cave. Because in many cities, the breweries were near water for 2 reasons. One, it supplied water for the brewery to make its beer, but also the caves often provided a place where they could harvest ice from the frozen winter and then preserve the beer. Anyway, so for some reason, the Chicago World's Ferry toddles. Maybe it's the gallons. Okay. Many giants prefer to dwell amidst impassable mountains, but the Chicago giant is surrounded by impossible fields. Soldier Field, Wrigley Field, Marshall Field, O'Hare Field, and the Field Museum. Although he generally just sulks and feels unappreciated, he sometimes stomps, roars, bellows, and even bursts into flames. Okay, the city of Chicago burned because a cow pushed over something, and anyway, and then also there's a picture of the lady in the image pouring water onto something. 3 such occasions were the shameless exhibitions of 1893 and 34, Grant Park, proximately to where one of those exhibitions occurred. Thank you very much. And the Democratic Convention of 68. That Convention of 68 is in the previous picture that I showed you of Mayor Daley, where he famously said, "We're not here to stop disorder. We're here to protect disorder," or something like that. Seen from the west, he has the appearance of an old, corrupt degenerate, a gangster in a baggy suit with a machine gun and a fiddle case. Okay, this is obviously Al Capone, references to Al Capone. There was a Valentine's Day massacre in Chicago. Not sure where it occurred. Well, actually, it occurred in several places around the city. But anyway, from the east, he looks like a hopeless, outsized rube, a barefoot village idiot with hay in his hair and skyscrapers for playthings. Okay, so we're kind of talking about the movie King Kong, and later in the back of the book, you'll see another giant, if you will, on top of the actual Empire State Building. The mortals who live in his mammoth shadow are frightened and confused lot, buffeted about by winds like the despairing shades of suicides in Dante's Inferno. Okay, again, wind and fire. Earth, wind, and fire. Wow, wouldn't it be something if Earth, Wind, and Fire was actually from Chicago? Anyway, the winds themselves result from the huge size of the giant as he contemplates and bemoans his unjustly neglected greatness. John Wayne. Arguably, he originates from one of three nations traditionally celebrated for producing large, pouting behemoths, this being Poland, Ireland, and Africa. When he arrived on the shores of Lake Michigan, he befriended the wild polecats, who were the area's most populous wildlife. And he feasted daily on wild onions, the only flora in profusion. His name, Chicago, is the Algonquin word for strong or powerful, which is thought to be uh, olfactory, an olfactory reference. So strong and powerful olfactory. Uh, a sportsman of note, he supervised both the fixed World Series and the Toonies long count. Nice. So the fixed World Series was basically this World Series in which a few people threw the game based upon the fact that they wanted to make money in the gambling. The Toonies long count occurred in 1927 at Soldier Field, and the Jack Dempsey is another famous uh, kicker. The kick that went through the uprights, and if one would appreciate the true enormity of the uh, uh, tediousness of the Chicago World's Fair, he is best viewed from the air, since all aircraft flying to or over his domain are obliged to circle for hours. You have ample opportunity. Okay, this was a dig at O'Hare Airport being a fairly slow airport, and you had to basically circle. Jazz giants neglected by their record labels, baseball superstars overlooked in the Hall of Fame voting because they cheated on baseball. One guy from that team actually applied every year to have his record expunged for gambling on baseball, and he indeed was probably one of the baseballers ever, but he never got. Uh, uh, and he might have been shoeless, by the way, kind of like this guy here with no shoes on. Anyway, okay, he is very prolific, and if you follow their unsuccessful careers, they will lead you to inevitably back home. Well, back home and a baseball reference probably sends you to Boston. And again, there are more than one reference in these. The Cal CU bus, the Calcubus. I point out the Calcubus only because I believe that the number nine figure sitting at the desk, dubiously writing with let's say, a dinosaur or dragon, a bird of wingless flight, hovering over him is indeed McMahon. A more sinister part of me would like to call that guy McKay, or McCoy, excuse me, McCoy. A sinister person in me would like to call that guy there McCoy, and that the guy sitting at the desk with a mustache that's still in school, with a bird on his wing for like Kentucky Fried Chicken, still in school is John Wayne. But I just can't go quite that far. It does say here the ancient Greek Pythagoras originally conjured the calculus, but it was Euclid who first put the creature to work. He set the nasty thing down in the middle of a bridge. There's a bridge that collapsed in the Solve for Cleveland. And finally, the Job Goblin, where we have an illustration of a train going off the tracks. Now, this could obviously be either Cleveland, uh, because that little house that was near the cultural garden, the guy committed suicide because his company had put a bridge in place over the river and it failed and like 96 people died. His family donated money for an old folks home type of thing. But this could also be the train that went off. But here the train looks to be going off of a bridge. And the bridge does appear to be the design of the type of bridge that the Cleveland. So maybe not, but here you have a train steaming down the track. But what's really disturbing is have a guy here with a wrench. It looks like he's hitting another guy with the wrench in the crowd. Slightly disturbing actions going on in that picture below. So, as my final thought, and as we return back to the so, did you notice that on page 171? Did you notice the tunnel? So, I think you might have gone too far here, but so you have this giant guy looking in the mirror, wearing a sea hat, and where his uh, where his let's say shoulder joint appears, I don't know. I just see a man's ass or a woman's ass, and I see a tunnel there. Again, stop. You've gone too far. So if you would par out this illustration, and then look at the little tiny house down at the bottom, and I don't think I'd ever go to Chicago again because that is terribly disturbing. Terribly disturbing. Okay. Well, that's my fun with the back of the book. I'm sure there's things I missed. Sure, there's some things I added that weren't really actually there. But when they put an actual story that kind of describes the wind and stuff like that, you gotta give it some credibility. Okay, well, that's the back of the book stream on the after show, if you will, on The Secret, puzzle number 5, Chicago. It looks like the next puzzle coming up is uh, Florida, and my solve will be a deviant, much deviant from the one that was presented. Again, we're talking about, oh, by the way, Belushi being in that one picture, not totally unfounded because National Lampoon magazine was responsible for producing a movie called Animal House and like Vacation, and so uh, So Belushi is obviously uh, the guy. The film, along with the 1977's The Kentucky Fried Movie, was also directed by Landis. Uh, and so, again, Kentucky Fried Movie. I'm even now more disturbed by this because John Wayne, his wife owned three KFCs. Now I'm a little bit more disturbed. But anyway, toga, toga, toga. All right, I better just stop. You run too far.